My name is Jenny Stodola. I'm the Vice Chair Youth of RCS Canada. I've been involved with the RCS since 2008 when I was a delegate of the National Student Commonwealth Forum run by the RCS Ottawa branch. Since 2009, I was a planning team member on the National Student Commonwealth Forum for about 4 years, which involves planning the forum with 30 other people and 2 co-chairs in the support of RCS Ottawa in different roles, starting in September, going all through till May. 2013, I was co-chair of the National Student Commonwealth Forum, and for the 3 years following that, I was program advisor, meaning I was mentoring the co-chairs and doing more of the administrative grant writing help that RCS Ottawa does in the background. Last year, or this year, I'm taking less roles than that, but it's definitely helped shape my skills and my experiences in almost the last 10 years. So I'm very appreciative of it, and I'd like to thank the RCS Ottawa branch for providing me with that opportunity. I'd also like to thank Joe Zasada and the RCS Edmonton branch for inviting me to speak today. I didn't really know what I was going to talk about, to be honest, because I'm a scientist, so you probably don't want me talking about proteins and all that. But I decided to talk about volunteerism, millennials, and the Royal Commonwealth Society. Myself being a millennial, I thought I'd offer I'd do some research and figure out what makes us tick, and try and see how that could be used to the advantage of the society, whether at the RCS Canada level, the branch level, or otherwise. So volunteerism differs based on country and cultural context. Here in Canada, we are fortunate that it is quite an integral part of our society. It is not so much expected, but it's not rare or surprising to find out that someone is involved in 1, 2, 3, 10 different organizations. This is not the case in other Commonwealth countries. For example, I've met people from certain Caribbean nations, and it's just not part of their culture. So I just did a little bit of research, and here you can see the darker colors on the map show where the highest concentration of volunteers are across the world. The first being the US, and then first Commonwealth nation is New Zealand, followed by Norway, Canada, Australia, the Netherlands, Ireland, Switzerland, Austria, and the UK. So just some interesting thoughts. In the next part of my presentation, I'm just going to show you some research that I found on the topic of volunteerism, and then I'll follow up with how can we utilize that information, specifically the information that pertains to millennials, which are people who are right now between the ages of 18 and 35, and represent quite an active demographic in society today. So the volunteering rate in hours for Canadians aged 15 and over as of 2013, as gathered by Statistics Canada, equals about 1.6 billion hours of volunteer hours, which represents to 1 million full-time jobs. So it's not an insignificant part of our society. The average number of hours a volunteer provides to others is 154 per year, and there's over 12 million volunteers in Canada. The volunteering rate in Canada is 44%. Also, I must say that it's difficult to collect volunteer data, and Canada is one of the few countries that actually regularly surveys the population with regards to their volunteer habits, so we're lucky to have this data at all. So at some points you might find information that's slightly conflicting, but I tried to pull out the main points. So 6 in 10 Canadians are volunteers. There's a 44% formal volunteer rate, but the informal volunteer rate is thought to be more than 82%, helping your neighbor, helping out at church, things like that, just off the cuff, agreeing to help someone out. So older Canadians volunteer less often, but contribute significantly more hours. So 66% of young people here defined as, or youth defined as 15 to 19-year-olds volunteer. This may be attributed because there might be requirements for getting a high school diploma, for example, or in some educational programs. Whereas 38% of people aged 65 to 74 volunteer 231 hours per year, higher than any other demographic. And there's pretty much a gender balance on volunteer rates in Canada. Volunteers are increasingly older. In 2013, 39% of volunteer hours were contributed by those aged 55 and older, compared to 31% in 2004. However, at the same time, volunteers are increasingly more educated. The proportion of volunteers aged 25 to 64 with university degrees rose to 39% recently. So that represents a huge amount of knowledge and expertise that is available to be harnessed by volunteer organizations and nonprofit organizations. So there's different levels of involvement from volunteers. So of the 7% of people who volunteer every day, they contribute about 526 hours per year. So that's at least an hour a day, every day. 37% of the population contributes about 36 hours of volunteering per year. But the combined top 25% of volunteers contribute 77% of the total volunteer hours. So those top volunteers are really pulling things forward for many organizations. And where do these volunteers decide to give their time? So 20% in social services. The next highest is sports and recreation, religion, education research, developing and housing, arts and culture, and health. But how do you find them? In Canada, most people are recruited as volunteers by word of mouth. And about 6% of the general volunteer population find opportunities online. However, those aged under 35, about 26% of them find opportunities online. And then why would someone not volunteer? Lack of time commitment. They prefer to donate money, or no one asked them. And so the motivations in Canada of volunteers can be categorized into quite a few different topics. But these also, as I will allude to shortly, align well with the values and goals of millennials of being able to contribute to the community, use skills and experience, being personally affected by a cause, wanting to improve a sense of well-being or health, exploring strengths, networking with others, because their peers or friends volunteer, they would like to support a cause, because a family member volunteers, to improve their job opportunities, and to fulfill religious obligations or beliefs. So while I was preparing for this talk, I was trying to figure out if there was any data on millennials. I mean, it's quite a population that always gets talked about in the media. So I was happy to find that the Chase Foundation in the United States has quite extensive research on this topic. So it's called the Millennial Impact Report. And since 2011, they've been conducting yearly surveys of United States millennials to gain some information about their interests, engagements, and motivation as it relates to how they contribute to causes they believe in. And they've interviewed about 75,000 millennials, so those born between 1980 and 2000. And I think even though this data is from the United States, I think it's quite reflective of the millennials found in Canada, since we do share strong cultural ties with the United States. So this was pretty much my favorite quote from the report, because they stated, "When we began our research in 2011, this generation was most often described in negative terms: lazy, apathetic, and entitled." And I am smack dab in that generation, and I can tell you my peers were not lazy, apathetic, or entitled. They were probably the most active, most activist, most involved people I knew. And obviously I'm very biased because they're also my friends, but it always irked me that this was the media's portrayal of my generation. Not that I really had anything to defend, or I didn't really feel I was in a place to defend myself, but I thought someone should do some surveys, so I'm glad someone has. And I would just like to read what they said 5 years later after they've done this research. So 5 years later, we have amassed data that has inarguably refutes these notions. The size and force of the millennial generation, combined with social media and pivotal world events of the past 5 years, require nonprofits to develop new ways of engaging audiences, lest they risk being left behind as millennial preferences fundamentally alter cause engagement. So I'm going to just take a couple minutes to go over the key findings from this report. I have a lot of statistics. I didn't really want to put them up on the screen, but I can give you a link to the report. It's quite interesting. I saw a lot of myself in it, and I think it does a fair reflection of this generation in general. So the first common finding over 5 years was intrinsic passion for a cause is what inspires millennials to act charitably. However, others can cultivate philanthropic behavior using key extrinsic motivators. So just looking at my list of statistics, in 2013, 79% of people surveyed volunteered for a cause because they were passionate about. And they gave 69% gave when inspired by a nonprofit. And then increasingly, as the years go on, in 2015, employers actually had great influence in what organizations millennials would contribute their time or money to. Common finding number 2 was the majority of millennials volunteered and gave charitably in modest amounts to multiple nonprofits. So millennials today are very connected. Often they use social media to learn about world events or about events connected to their networks. And they're more likely to give to people they know or causes that others they know are passionate about. Finding number 3 was female millennials give more financial support than males, and older millennials give more financial support than younger ones. In addition, larger donations correlate with more volunteer hours in all segments. So obviously, older millennials have already been able to establish their careers and might be in a more stable financial position to contribute back to organizations they've been involved with over the last 10 years or so. Finding number 4, peer-to-peer engagement, which I've already alluded to, I think several times, that peer-to-peer engagement, including that which occurs in the workplace, is a critical influence on and vehicle through which millennials charitably give and volunteer. So before, you saw the motivations from Canadians of why they volunteer, and several of those were mentioned: peers, families, and friends as reasons why people volunteer, and word of mouth. So this is especially true for millennials because there is an endless amount of possibilities and opportunities afforded, especially in Canada. We are very lucky to have a very diverse charitable and nonprofit sector. So knowing someone that works for an organization and talking to them and using them as an in to get into the organization is something that is attractive, because they will know if it's worth their time or aligned with their interests before even starting, because they can talk to their peer. Opportunities to use and develop skills and areas of expertise are prime motivators in millennial philanthropic engagement. We've been told since we were young we have to pad up that CV so we can get a job. So we're kind of ingrained in us that volunteerism is just also another avenue that we can stand out from the crowd when we're finding that first job, that second job. So I know that's pretty much my first motivations for volunteering were that, in fact. And in university, I was involved with multiple university clubs and different causes. And primarily that was to make sure that I could demonstrate to an employer that I had developed skills through these different organizations. And the last common finding is that millennials primarily use digital technology to access information about and donate to causes and nonprofit. Yet each platform plays a distinct role. And I want to emphasize that nonprofits don't need to be exclusively online, but they just have to have an active enough presence online that newcomers or millennials understand that is an active organization. So it's not tweeting something every day, having 10,000 Facebook posts every day. It's just making sure that things are up to date and things are communicated in a timely manner. That's what millennials are looking for. They just want to make sure the organization they're contributing to is active, and the only way they will know that from their perspective is if the online presence is present. Until they actually join the organization, then obviously know everything that will be going on. So 5-year conclusions from this paper. Millennial engagement in causes is moving from cursory interest to activism, reflecting a maturation of the generation's inherent desire to do good. Millennial engagement with causes will expand as this generation ages and as causes learn to connect with individuals more effectively. And finally, millennial preferences and cause engagement will alter current models of giving, as viewed by Kickstarter campaigns for organizations and personal situations, and views on how to affect change in the world. So knowing all these statistics and what the trends show, how can we harness this dynamic demographic? So I'm going to outline a couple arguments how the Royal Commonwealth Society can engage young people, and how different projects, I'll use some case study projects to show how these ideas and aspirations and values that were discussed here, and we also had a brief discussion about that in the previous session, how they can be applied to your branch, to RCS Canada, and to any other nonprofit organization that you might find yourself volunteering for. So, first step, education. The Commonwealth is a challenging brand to market in Canada. We all know this. There's little to no prior knowledge of the Commonwealth in the general population. As mentioned yesterday by one of the speakers, I think that was on another topic, sorry about that. But anyways, I didn't learn about the Commonwealth in high school or elementary school, other than in the context of Commonwealth allies during the wars. It did not have a place in our curriculums and doesn't have a place in our curriculums these days. So the first challenge is explaining the Commonwealth, and as you know, explaining the Commonwealth is a challenge in and of itself. That brings me to you have to always make sure to take the time and challenge assumptions of what the Commonwealth is and isn't. And I guess I should have had a disclaimer at the beginning of my talk. These are my suggestions, and you guys are all very much more experienced in managing volunteers and running volunteer organizations than myself. So I just don't want to sound condescending, I guess. Whoops. Anyways, that's a brief aside. Anyways, the last point in education, and it goes for everyone involved, the new volunteer coming in and the operational management of the organization, is to understand, embrace, and be sensitive to intergenerational nature of the Royal Commonwealth Society. More than any other organization I've been involved with, the Royal Commonwealth Society brings in people from all walks of life, from all ages, from all backgrounds, and it does a remarkable job of integrating all those people together. But sometimes we forget that our experiences aren't other people's experiences, and we just have to be aware and accommodate and discuss with people what people's expectations are, what people's abilities are, and what they want to contribute. The next part is effective engagement. Easier said than done. We're all volunteers, especially in the Royal Commonwealth Society, so we have to manage our own expectation and our own levels of engagement so that we can support others as well. From the perspective of the Millennials, we've grown up in collaborative educational environments, and we appreciate working with others as peers, even if traditionally management systems have been more hierarchical. Millennials really embrace horizontal management and horizontal sharing of resources, of knowledge and skills. And so welcoming newcomers of all ages to an organization has to be done as a peer, or should be done as a peer. Listening to their questions, and more importantly, their aspirations and goals, will help you understand who they are and be able to meet their needs. They're not, Millennials especially have very clear ideas of what they want to get out of volunteering. It's as much as a give as a take. I give you my time, I give you my skills, you give me more skills, you give me more experience. So it's a dialogue and a sharing experience when Millennials volunteer. It's a transaction, if you will. One aspect that can be done to effectively engage new millennial volunteers, I would suggest to provide parallel processes that might be maybe more in line with their immediate goals, but integrate them quickly into the greater organization so they can really understand what the organization is about. Although that's a very vague statement, but I'll elaborate it a little bit further, but essentially, when you attract a new volunteer, they come knocking on your door saying they want to be involved. Internally, they have an expectation that they will be welcomed if possible, like for example, if you do have space for new volunteers. And if they are welcomed into the organization, there's something for them to do right away. Right away being a couple weeks. After that point, they think they may find other opportunities that have more immediate actions they can work on. So you have to be able to find a mechanism in your organization that can accommodate new volunteers. Whether it's a small project, doesn't have to be anything grand, but something that is an ongoing project that they could be connected to right away. And so this brings the idea of micro-volunteering, providing opportunities to contribute even just an hour or two of their time to be a helpful volunteer for you for 1 or 2 hours in a short period of time is really a way to make sure they they are open to future opportunities to volunteer with you, even if a major one isn't coming for several weeks or months. And that, with micro-volunteering, it allows you to keep in touch and talk with them more and figure out, give you more time to adapt or to figure out how their goals can be met in your organization. And to steal one of the comments from our speakers yesterday, lean in. So the Commonwealth is a network of networks, and you are the gatekeepers to this wider world community for millennials in Canada, because you are their first point of contact in what the Commonwealth is. And maybe they will stay in your organization for many years, but maybe you will provide them the avenue to explore something new. As we talked earlier, the Commonwealth is made of 80 accredited organizations, but there's in very many different areas, and maybe their particular goals won't fit in your organization, but they could still be involved with a partner organization. So being open to that is to that concept of someone just coming in to get information and then keeping in touch with them as they move on in the Commonwealth communities and networks is actually a strength, because you can get them to return some new volunteers from their other organizations, Commonwealth organizations that they might find. And then we've talked a lot about the Charter of the Commonwealth, and it has many different facets, and the interpretation of the Charter is different at every branch. But as a branch, or RCS Canada, or other organization, what is your niche? What is your focus? And how can you best explain it to a newcomer in the most attractive way possible, to be blunt? And as I alluded to before, how can your organization mold to the interests of a new volunteer? How can your organization build the skill set of your volunteer? That's the one key thing I would recommend to keep in mind when dealing with millennials in a volunteer organization. That is how you're paying them. You're paying them for, they're contributing their time, and you're paying them in the ability for them to hone their skills, to learn new skills, and to grow as a person. So taking all these concepts together with what we've learned today, there's lots of opportunities for branches to engage with young people. Micro-volunteering. Maybe you have an ongoing project and you have someone who's interested in writing joining your branch. Well, do you have a newsletter? Could they contribute 2 articles to the newsletter? Could they be mentored by someone who writes this newsletter? Or is there a committee that meets twice a month? That's an opportunity for them to learn how committees work and the structures and procedures that entails. That is an important life skill that many millennials don't actually learn in school. Leadership and skills development. So my expertise, as I mentioned, is in the National Student Commonwealth Forum and the Model CHOGM consensus. Organizing a Model CHOGM not only allows young people to participate in a CHOGM, but you can use it as a mechanism for them to learn project management, to get them to organize the Model CHOGM on behalf of your branch. You work with them, they get experience in terms of finding volunteers, working with peers, working within a committee structure, organizing venues, times, locations, recruitment. And these skills, you, as a nonprofit organization, sometimes you have to take the time to be a little bit of a mentor and outline the skills they have gained, because they just go through the motions, but if you never debrief with them how things go, they might not learn from these experiences. So mentorship is also an important part of volunteering for millennials, or any person really, because we're all in it together in the end of the day, and we're all doing it because we're passionate about it, so we might as well learn from each other. Governance, as I mentioned, being part of committees of the greater branch or the greater organization gives a lot of skills for young people. And another thing that I didn't mention from the report, but is a general trend along millennials, is that they need to know where they can go. They need to understand that they might be starting at the bottom of the ladder, so to speak, but there may be a straight way to the top that they can follow. There might be branches that they can take. Depending on which branch they can take on different opportunities. So knowing the scope of your organization is also important for a millennial volunteer. And then using peer networks is very important and probably your most reliable source of new millennial volunteers. Because if they enjoy volunteering for your organization, they will talk about it with their friends and get their friends involved. So I'm just going to go over some of the more formal projects done by RCS internationally, just as examples of what can be done and the places where volunteers, especially those under the age of 29, because that's the definition of youth from the Commonwealth Secretariat, can get involved. So the Queen's Commonwealth Essay Competition is where the first young future Commonwealth leaders learn about the Commonwealth. It's a competition under the age of 18, as you all know. So that's one avenue. As they get older and become young professionals, at the moment they can apply to be a Queen's Young Leader, where they can get an award from Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II and leadership opportunities in connection to a greater network of Commonwealth leaders across the world. There's other ways of engaging volunteers. Taking on the portfolio of ending the practice of early and forced child marriage is something the RCS has done in recent years and partnered with other organizations to do so. So this is like more of a cause-based reason to volunteer for a certain organization like the RCS. And then we have the Commonwealth Youth Gender and Equality Network, or ongoing discussions at the intergovernmental levels where RCS can be a moderator for difficult discussions on topics such as LGBT rights. And then environmental causes can be explored through projects like the Queen's Commonwealth Canopy. And then moving beyond RCS, being aware of what is available or opportunities that there are across the world. There's the Commonwealth Secretariat, the Commonwealth Youth Council, which is an organization for young people under the age of 29. So the Commonwealth Secretariat provides other areas of emphasis or projects that volunteers can get involved with. And the Commonwealth Youth Council has various different networks that really cater to the interests and the passions of young people. Beyond that, you have the network of networks. So the professional organizations, the government institutions, so on and so forth. And really allowing and educating your volunteers about those opportunities can really bring new people to your organization, because they will go on to those organizations, they'll come back, they'll still be involved, and you can really harness different skills and perspectives. So I hope you enjoyed my talk. I tried to touch upon sort of the intergenerational challenges of a nonprofit organization, but really show you how you can probably use things you already do in your branches at different levels, at different times of the year, to really just rebrand it a little bit. Not rebrand it, but like use a little bit of different messaging, and you can really take advantage of the passions and the interests of young people and get them involved in your branch. And I would say that mentorship is one of the strongest resources you could provide to young people. Because even just using the case of the recently opened Commonwealth, RCS Canada Commonwealth Youth Council, I basically just facilitated young people from different branches to talk to each other. And after a certain point, we found out two young people were organizing the same type of event, virtually identical. They had thought of these events independently of each other. One had already run their event. So I just asked that young person to mentor the second person who hadn't done the event yet. And I just sat back and listened to them chat about it. And facilitating those kinds of conversations already just gave one person the skills of mentorship. So that's just one example of how you can just leverage the volunteers you already have to benefit your organization and benefit the personal development of your volunteers. Thank you.